All right, Freddie, we're rocking and rolling. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Matt. It's nice and sunny for a change.
Very good. That's right. You're up in the upper northeast, up in Maine, correct?
Yeah, for some reason, we don't get much rain up here, and this winter's been unusually wet and wild and crazy and cold. So I picked the wrong year not to leave for New Zealand so I can get summer twice.
That's right. It's great to follow chase the summer around the world. That's a fantastic way of being.
Yeah, I wish thought about it years ago.
Freddie, last time you were on, we talked about a little bit of your work in portals, and we focused on your crop circle work. And for anybody that hasn't read Secrets in the Field, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best books on the subject. But today I want to talk about one of your other books, your other work that you've done, First Templar Nation. I've been kind of exposed to this through the work of Michael Bagiet and Henry Lincoln's book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And then I read, I think, the follow-up book, The Jesus Papers, and now I've read your book, First Templar Nation. And I mean, this stuff is absolutely mind-blowing, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of some of these stories and this research that people like yourself have done. So I want to dig right in here, and let's talk about First Templar Nation and Portugal as kind of this hidden architect of Western civilization. When you were doing your research, what surprised you the most when you were kind of going through this?
That nobody, and I mean nobody, had figured out what the Templars were really about, and the fact that they'd been operating at least 15 years before the official date that's mentioned in just about every book on the planet, including so-called Templar experts. That floored me. And I think partly to do with the fact that none of them understand Portuguese. And of course, having been born in Portugal myself, that's easy for me. But I found the original documents hiding in plain sight. And I thought it was going to be a very simple book, a very simple project. I was just fascinated to find out why this little country is so fascinated with the Templars. They even set their civic calendar to the dates which are known to be the birth date of Mary Magdalene, or at least the commemoration of the date of Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist. Which are not two big people in the Bible, in the Catholic Church. It's usually about Jesus, and the fact that the Templars did not dedicate any buildings to Jesus at all. And I thought, there's a story here. Why would that be? And then 14 years later, I finally finished the research in the book because it suddenly opened up a whole can of worms. And you'd mentioned Holy Blood, Holy Grail. I was in touch with Michael Bajan. In fact, I nearly got to meet him in New Zealand. It was one of my heroes. He's a true theologian researcher, and he lists everything exactly from fact. And I like people like that. And he kind of helped put the foundation under the book in terms of what they had already discovered. Because if you want to find out about anything, and especially about the Templars, you got to go back 60 years in history and begin there and find out how did things end up where they ended up. And then you begin to understand what the Templars really were about.
And I want to dig into this a little bit. So, they weren't just warrior monks. They were probably guardians of some sort of mystery school or sacred science. What do you think they were protecting, and from whom? What was their modus operandi, do you think? Because I
Oh,
know this is a big question.
the usual suspects, of course. The Templars essentially they weren't even monks really. They didn't do much fighting, even though back then the whole of Europe was a complete mess. So you had to learn how to use a sword before you even learn how to read and write. Even priests had to do that just to
Mm.
survive. And the original core group is what my story really focuses on, the origins of the whole Templar thing. They were minor nobles living in the middle of France, Burgundy, and what would become Belgium. And they gave up all their wealth to go digging in hot, uncomfortable tunnels underneath Jerusalem to look for treasure. No, I would have sat at home with my feet next to the fireplace reading a good book and saved myself the trouble. If you're already rich, you don't go and do hard labor to get more wealth. You invest it in the stock market at the time, or in the trading with the Vikings and so forth.
Mm.
No, it really turns out that if you look at the people that were involved with the original creation of the Templars, half of whom were involved as Cistercian monks. So the Cistercians and the Templars were essentially the same people. Even the members of the Order of Sion were also part of the same people. There were three groups that formed the Templars, not just one. It was three different groups that created this wonderful head of knowledge. And the one thing that was very adamant was they were very big into Kabbalah. They were very big into the Eastern mystery. And also they were very big on the Essenes. Now, once you start looking at those people and all of those areas of mysticism, you realize that this is a kind of a brain trust. These people came from a very enlightened part of Europe at the time that was trying to bring out a kind of renaissance in the middle of this very dark era in human history. And that tells me that these people were not involved in fighting or going after money. They were involved with things of a much more spiritual nature. So
Mm.
when we start talking about the treasure, the word treasure back in the day did not mean money. Treasure comes from the word thesauro in Greek, which means thesaurus. And as we know, when we're lost for words, we go and dig up a book called a thesaurus. So what they were looking for was a treasure of words, because the first thing that they found on the Temple Mount was a bunch of scrolls. They sent two of the knights back to what would become Belgium to talk to a cryptographer. Now,
Mm.
that tells me that something was so important, written in scrolls, that had to be written in code in order to protect the information in those scrolls from people who would misuse the information. And the people who were behind the scrolls were the Essenes, who were very big on Eastern mysticism, and particularly the mysteries of experiencing death while you live. It was the
Mm.
biggest secret in all mystical schools for thousands of years, where you undertake a near-death experience by joining what we call a cult, but it didn't mean what we think it means back then. They joined a certain group who understood the mysteries of life, and the point was to escape the physical body in a special restricted ceremony, leave the body for several days in an induced near-death experience, and then come back and go on living a very healthy life. 2,000 years ago, one famous person practiced that. He was called Yeshua ben Yosef, otherwise known as
Mm.
Jesus. And he was
Mhm.
practicing what thousands of people had done before him as well, including the Egyptians. That was one of the things that they were protecting. The other one was a real treasure. It was called the Ginza. And if you go to southern Iraq today and you meet the Mandeans, who are true Christians, not Catholics, they'll say, yes, the Ginza is the book of John the Baptist, which the church said John never wrote a book. Well, yes, it did, because it's right here. It's a big, heavy book. And they said, this is called the Ginza. And it means, excuse me,
You're fine.
it means the treasure. And I thought, oh, so the treasure is a book of mystical teachings by John the Baptist, which is not his real name, by the way. He comes from a very long tradition of baptism and resurrection mysteries. So when you put all these things together, you realize what the Templars were doing and protecting was a secret initiation that allowed a true mystical experience of God, whatever way you want to call it.
Mhm.
The idea is that you cross into the other world, you come back 3 days later, declared raised from the dead, and then you go about your daily life aware of how the universe really works and in control of your destiny, your manifestation process.
Mm.
Plato even talked about it because he did the same thing too,
Mhm.
enough, as did Pythagoras 5 times. So these were the most important things at the time because the church had a monopoly on mysticism. If you wanted to talk to God, you have to pay people in the church and they'll intercede on your behalf. Maybe. The Templars were saying, no, you can do that directly through this experience that we've learned from these secret teachings that have been going on since Japan in 8000 BC. That's how old this stuff is. But the trick is you have to have integrity to work with this information. And if you don't have integrity, you are not allowed into the secret brotherhood, whether you're a Templar, an Essene, a Mandean, or so forth. You have to have the integrity because you can also do nefarious things with it, like control entire populations. So
Mm.
the whole thing was a very spiritual enterprise right from the very beginning. The money comes in later when they were offering this sort of protection, spiritual protection and physical protection to people throughout Europe. And whatever money they had, they would give to the Templars because they were the antidote to the church, which was trying to do the very opposite of what the Templars were trying to achieve. So that kind of is the whole thing in a nutshell.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. And, you it's interesting, these, I'm sure you've read the sequel to the, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Jesus Papers, and there's these
Very good book. Yep.
these yeah,
Oh
these,
my
I
God.
mean, look, you're talking about stuff here that's heretical in terms of the canonized Bible here, but, I mean, it's very compelling. It's very interesting that you have things like Jesus saying, he's not espousing that he is the son of God. He's like, we're all sons of God, right? Everyone can feel this. Everyone can be this. and he's trying to get this information out, which probably rattled a few cages
Oh, just a
during
few.
the time. And if there's validity to what he's saying and there's truth and people that's resonating with people, this is going to cause a big problem. And so you have these sort of these big moments in like 350 AD, 550 AD with the Council of Nicaea, the Council of Constantinople, and they're canonizing certain scriptures
Mm.
to be the story, and they're the harbingers of this story. And then you fast forward a couple thousand years, and you have this discovery in Qumran, which you talk about a little bit in the book of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I think it was in 1947.
Mm.
Um, can you talk about the Templar connection to what was on some of these scrolls?
We don't quite know, but what we do know is it was written in a certain code to protect the information, which is why you needed a cryptographer to actually go through the whole thing. And when I was researching the material that one of the Templar masters in Portugal brought back from Jerusalem, many years after the Crusades had done their work, the story still exists in this local village. It's where their main buildings are in Tomar in Portugal. Beautiful place. And they said, yeah, this guy brings back these scrolls from Jerusalem, and it took a Hebrew Kabbalist months to uncover the whole thing, and it ran into 5,000 pages. I mean, it was ridiculous how much material there was, but it seemed to be to do with mostly with this experience of how to work with the body, with the mind, how to discover the secrets of nature, and how to bend the rules of nature to human intention, which is A, wonderful, and two, extremely dangerous. It's a
Mm,
bit like if you want to bring it to the common era, if you go to New Mexico after 10 years of drought and you talk to the Navajo, and the shaman will go up to the top of a hill, use the power of intention, and within an hour, there's a low cell depression over New Mexico and there's torrential rain. That's what I'm talking about. It's practical stuff that you can use, but it can be abused as well. The rest of it is very hush hush. It's we just don't know. But
mm,
one of the things that popped out during the Inquisition, when they were trying to torture the few Templars that they caught alive, and most of the Templars, by the way, they went to their graves without saying a word. They said, "No, we would
mm.
rather die than give away this information because the survival of the human race depends on the integrity of this information." One of them did finally relent, I think, because his feet were being burnt to a crisp. And he basically was talking about the protection of a divine bloodline within the Templar Brotherhood. And it was hearsay. People talk about the fact that Mary Magdalene was part of this, the end of this bloodline that had been going on for thousands of years, at least traceable to Sumeria in
Mm,
about 3000 BC. And I got very interested in that because I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if there's people with the bloodline that are still surviving, because Henry Lincoln, Lee, and Bajan actually picked up on that. But I didn't want to. My book was already, 800 references deep, and I thought I can't go into another direction on this. But I did find out when I was in Portugal that there was a split in the Templar Brotherhood there to protect something of incredible value, and that's what you hear. I
mhm,
figured, there's nothing more important at the time than the heirs of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, which are the biggest threat to Europe at the time. You got to think of the period that you're in.
mm,
If I had several children as part of the bloodline that survived that, and their progeny are still living, I would split up the family. I would keep some in France, some in Scotland, which is all
mm,
rumored to be around Rosslyn, and the other one I would keep in Portugal because that's where the main temples were. And that's where the
mm,
Templars originally had set up shop 10 years at least before they became officially recognized in Jerusalem, which again, so few people know about. And I made this inquiry and I found that there was another split in the actual group of the Templars. And their logo was the Templar logo with a fleur de lis attached to it, which is the symbol of the divine bloodline in the Merovingian family in France. And I just made some inquiries, and basically, and this is to do with the Freemasons as well, because when the Templars moved to Scotland, they changed their name to Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Very clever.
mhm, mm.
That's not the London Rite. That comes much later, and it's not the same group of people. But I have friends in the Scottish Rite, and I asked this question, and they said, well, let's just say you got your nose very deep in the honey pot, and let's just leave it at that. And so
Okay.
I take it that I've actually found that there is a bloodline that survives in Portugal this very day. Even they don't know who they are. It's for their own protection. So that was the other part of the big mystery that they were trying to protect. But that was also inferred in the scrolls themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very attractive story, and it's I know that there's some evidence that this bloodline has continued on, and if that is true, yeah, and you have this devotion to these mystery schools, you would protect that at all costs. You would obfuscate at all costs. There is no way you would let anyone know that, and there's a lot of interesting stories that kind of coincide with that. You mentioned some of the scrolls and how they would sort of, obfuscate within the scrolls. And I don't know if this is true or not, but have you looked at gematria within the scrolls or anything like? Has anyone done that work within
I'm
some of these
not
ancient scrolls?
familiar. I don't think, it's not to my knowledge, they haven't. But I would not be surprised if gematria was involved in all of this. I mean, it was involved even in the first four folios of, let's say, The Man Called William Shakespeare,
Mm,
which was discovered by a Norwegian independent researcher. And he's made a very good case that all the numerical values of all the pages in those folios do have a geometrian story written within it. And he's been able to
mhm,
prove it very convincingly because geometry is very mathematical. It's either right or it's wrong. You can't invent this stuff. And the fact is that he discovered the original four versions of the Shakespeare's works in the British Library in London. And even the British librarians didn't know that it was there. And it was under the pen name of, oh God, his name's gone right out of my head.
mhm.
The guy who we believe is Shakespeare himself.
Francis Bacon?
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Francis
sorry,
Bacon.
yeah. I wasn't sure. I didn't wanna say it until you got it.
Yeah, and it's in his handwriting, which means they're at least 30 years younger than Shakespeare, because I don't think Shakespeare was even around when Bacon was in his full flight. So he's made a very good point that all of these scrolls also carry the second end of information. And a lot of the names in the scrolls that do survive, they do hide actual real people's names under the cover of other names as well. Again,
Mhm.
these people are being hunted. So, of course, you're going to protect these things with all kinds of double cryptography. It's very James Bond, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's so much fun to kind of explore these topics and to look at gematria. Are you familiar with the book, The Bible Codes by Michael Dresden?
Oh God, that was back in the 1990s, I think.
Back in the 90s, and there was I think an Israeli mathematician, I forget his name, Dr. Rip something, who, obviously it's a controversial book because he's decoding things out of the Bible that have retrocausality involved with it. So there's like messages of things that are going to happen, but that goes down another rabbit hole that we're probably not going to get into right now. But
I was wondering when you're going to go with that one.
um, let's talk about some of the architecture of the Templars, because I know you've done extensive work on ancient sites and how they're not built arbitrarily and they're built in certain locations. Are some of the sites that you visited is that are part of this book, are they part of these energetic nodal points that you've talked about in portals and other books?
Without question. And that was the one stumbling block that I hit when I was in the middle of the book, because it was, I literally was writing yourself within 4 months and suddenly, boom, I'm not making any progress. And I thought, okay, I'm missing something here. There's something else I need to know about. And I took a left turn. I went off and did more research with sacred sites and found out how they work, the mechanics of it, gathered a lot of great information about the measurement of energy at standing at megalithic sites, which hardly anyone talked about, which I'm absolutely astounded by. And I went back to Portugal, where the original sites were, and figured out that, wait a minute, without exception, all of their preceptories, all of their towers, all of their castle, all occupy previous sites of ancient veneration, and specifically dedicated to Isis or her regional doppelganger that was in Portugal. So I thought, okay, these are a bunch of guys that are basically worshipping a female deity or protecting the energy of a female deity. And it still wasn't sinking in until I read the 400 surviving letters of Bernard de Clairvaux, who was basically their godfather. He was the one for instilling discipline within the Templar Brotherhood, because people were joining the Templars left, right, and center, thinking that they were going to get rich because they were after some treasure, because they didn't understand what the treasure was about.
Hmm.
And the letter from Hugh de Payon to Bernard de Clairvaux is wonderful. It was like he's desperate. It's like he's trying to maintain order within the early Templar Brotherhood from people who were just joining as mercenaries. He said, No, we don't want this. We want a code of conduct because this is a spiritual group. We're looking for something better than anything physical. And Bernard de Clairvaux comes in and he starts adding this layer of information. And that's where the penny dropped. Because he's talking about that the Templars, any soldier should forget about ordinary soldiery and join the true Christian doctrine, which is a spiritual doctrine of the heart and the mind together. It's something much greater than anything in the physical world. And the swearing in ceremony for anyone joining the Templar Brotherhood was, I vow to this to join the Templars and uphold the tradition to discover the joys of paradise. That doesn't sound like someone joining the Templars to go learning how to fight Arabs, discover the joys of paradise. Well, paradise is a spiritual doctrine. It's about discovering peace within yourself while you're living here on earth. It's a very Buddhist tradition. And that's when I put all these things together and I thought, my God, we know what the sacred sites do to your consciousness and your state of awareness and also your spiritual foundation, if you allow it to. Would it be possible that the Templars also were tuning into what the Essenes knew about sacred space, which they did, and put one and one together? And yes, they were protecting these places of energy, which is where they would put their secret chambers. And there's one that still exists in Portugal, which the director of the main monument does not want to talk about. She thinks it's not there. And I found the actual evidence in a newspaper in the local library from 1943. So
Is this in Tomar?
It's in Tomara, the Rotunda, and she didn't talk to me after that. And that's okay. And there's another one in Scotland that's on the island of Mull, another preceptory, which is called a well, except it's filled with seawater, not very good for drinking. You're not gonna live very long if you keep drinking seawater. So basically, they were putting the places where they did what they call the incubation, which is the place where you take the narcotic, you leave the body, and you come back into your living body 3 days later, and are aroused from the dead. The practice still survives in the third degree of Freemasonry, by the way. They were using the energy of the site in order to conduct these mystical experiences. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Once you understand how sacred sites work, you take that information, you transpose it all onto the Templars, were choosing for their places of veneration, and the two overlap absolutely perfectly.
And are they using geometry to amplify this within the temples themselves? Because I know there's a lot of talk that like the slope angles of the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids actually amplify energy, whatever's naturally there, or these aren't arbitrary architecture that they're putting in there. They're doing this on purpose to do something. Have you noticed that as well?
Oh God, yeah. There's not many of the sites that remain intact, which is a bit unfortunate. But the ones that do, let's take the Rotunda in Tomada, which is their most famous monument, or the Charola, as the Portuguese call it, which is a very important word, by the way, and not many people know about it.
What word is that?
Charola. Because
Charola.
rotunda is the same word in Portuguese. It's Latin. It means a round building, but it's not really a round building. It's actually a 16-sided building or a double octagon. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're looking at where the Templars got their spiritual information from, which is the Middle East, the octagon is a very important geometric shape. It's the balance of the light and the dark incorporated into all the mosques. Every mosque is basically octagonal in design. It's if you take that into its very literal term, it's also the checkerboard pattern, which is the foundation logo of the Freemasons. It's the black and the white, the chessboard. So it's the black and the white, it's the game of light and dark. And the idea is to master the game and become balanced between the two. Not too light, not too dark, right in the middle. And in Tumara, in the Rotunda, or the Charola, you have the 16-sided image, and the central point is the 17th. Now, if you know your mysteries teachings, the 17th degree is one of the most potent mysteries teachings in Masonic, in Scottish Rite Freemasons, which is the discovery of the self within a special, hidden, mysterious ritual that was conducted in total secret. So the individual that goes into this building is the 17th degree, okay? And between the two octagons that make up the rotunda, you have this central tower on the inside of the building, and the space in between is governed by a triangle that faces up and one triangle that faces down, essentially the Star of David. And that is basically the chalice and the womb, which is the combination of the divine feminine with the divine masculine, something that Sam Brown obviously popularized in his work. which is borrowed from Henry Lee Lincoln.
Hmm.
And so they basically did this in this building in order to tell you that what the process that was taking place inside the rotunda was based on octagonal geometry, which is the symbol of the balanced individual, and then the masculine and the feminine in total harmony with each other. So again, doesn't sound like a bunch of guys with big swords who are learning how to kill people. That's a very, very centralized design in order to tell you what the building is there to do. And you'll find this, for example, in Egyptian temples. The Osirian at Abydos has something very similar as well. You don't see it, but you can sense that there's something about the building because it's about the relationship and movement of energy within that environment, which creates an effect on the person that's visiting. And it's palpable when you go there by yourself first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've never been in one of these chambers where there's this. I mean, people have described this reverberation, and you can probably speak to this. And I know you've had some very wild experiences while in these places, and I know you've spoken about them before. What do you think is happening in the brain? Is there a vibration of one of like the vagus nerve or something? Has there been some research on what's actually happening to the human being that's creating these sort of, shall we say, wild experiences that people sort of have in there, these consciousness experiences?
Yeah, basically, it's the when you created an environment where you're filtering out, you're choosing the stone as well very carefully to filter
Mhm.
out outside frequencies because we live in an electromagnetic soup, and even
Mhm.
so today with the cell phone towers. So you're filtering out certain frequencies to change the shape of the electromagnetic spectrum within the actual sites itself. Now, whether you're talking about Templars or ancient mounds or passage mounds, doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. And pyramids too. It's the same process. And so you're bringing down the frequencies. You're shielding out frequencies that shouldn't belong in your body when you want to be in a state of reverence. And the usual frequency is around 5 hertz, which is usually the frequency of healers or people when they're doing prayer. They're bringing down all of that energy into a very fine point where you are concentrating with something greater than yourself. And you're expanding your energy field as well, your aura, if you want to call it that. But the combination of the sonic frequencies and the electromagnetic spectrum starts to have an effect, first of all, on the blood. It starts moving all the oxygen, the iron in the blood, and it starts exacerbating the amount of oxygen that's flowing through your body. So you start feeling very, very different. The
Mm.
vibration itself affects the pineal gland. It starts
Mm.
vibrating at little finger-like protuberance. And when it starts vibrating at quite a fast speed, it connects the two hemispheres of the brain. Now, something happens when you do that. You create a chemical reaction and you start generating a chemical called DMT, which is
Mm.
central to your dreaming state and also to receiving information from another level of reality. And this has
Mhm.
been done in so many books already. It's been going on for 40 years. It's very fundamental. And the other one is that the total frequency of these places, and by the way, in Portugal, the three main Templar sites coincide with three major megalithic areas in the Iberian Peninsula, which also coincide with three gravitational hotspots. So
Where are those?
gravity, when you move gravity beyond this normal level, whether it's a deficient gravity field or an amplified gravity field, that also allies with your brainwave patterns, which means when you go into these buildings under a certain state of grace, because you go there as a skeptic, nothing's going to work. You've already
Mm.
told the atoms in your body, I don't believe in any of this nonsense. If you go
Mm.
in a state of balance, you begin to sense that something is happening to you. And that's where the visions begin. Okay. And this is why we call the site sacred, because it's a place where it's a meeting place where the veil between two worlds are very thin. And what you're receiving is not just a chemical reaction, it's actually an image of what's going on in another level of reality. So let's say that the human body is at 88 FM, you're now picking up 90 FM. And the two worlds start aligning very well. This is why these places were maintained for thousands of years for that specific reason to get you to recognize, A, you're not alone in the universe. Two, you can extract information from the other world and bring it to bear in your daily life, which is what Plato was telling us all along, and Pythagoras, by the way. And you become a better person. You become much more aware of your purpose in life, and you're able to live every moment in a useful way that makes the 80 years of your incarnation useful. You're putting yourself to work and making best of your time here so that when you physically die, you go back as a much more well-rounded off soul. That's the whole purpose of life, to make the best of your time here. So that's essentially what the Templars were tapping into. And any Egyptian that would hear this would say, of course, that's what we did with the pyramids. And that's why the pyramids have different angles. They create different effects on your body.
Yeah, I mean, that pattern matches to what I've kind of learned in my own just sort of independent research into these topics is that, one of the main reasons that we're here is to learn and experience. And once you kind of pass on, that information kind of goes back to, I would just call it the one or the all. And then, that this is how the universe gets to learn about itself. It probably
Exactly.
individuates itself through multiple different types of life forms, intelligent and non-intelligent, all across the cosmos, and they have experiences and then they pass on and that information gets back. And so
Yeah.
whatever the universe is, whatever you want to call it, God, I think it's all a learning process. That
I
seems
think it
that
is.
seems right to me.
The more I've been doing this for over 30 years, and it's not just my direct experience of these things, it's also other people who I respect who've had similar experiences. And once you start collecting these experiences and talk to people whose ancestors were here 12,000 years ago, and these are my favorite people, they tell me that their ancestors at the end of the Ice Age were doing this, this, and this. I said, well, that's not very different from what we're doing today, really. And it's very important to understand that the universe is actually very simple when you think about it. We're trying to look at the cause and effect of everything. But at the end of it, if you bring it all down to its lowest common denominator, you have a central source which creates everything, which is a huge paradox. How do you create all of this without having experience of anything that you've not created? It's the
Mhm.
ultimate paradox. But if you imagine it, the central force or God as a kind of jellyfish, and we are the little tentacle, okay, on the very points of the tentacles that go out that allow the jellyfish to move through time and space. We are experiencing creation for the creator, and we're sending back information, reporting it every single second of the day. And the creator is adding, adapting, and changing. So technically, it's not that difficult to understand. The thing is that we as souls evolve at different levels. So, for example, here on Earth, right now, it's a complete mess. But why it's a mess is because some of the people are more advanced than others, not because they're better. It's just because they've had more experience at incarnating, they've had more experience of living in the universe, and they kind of know what happens from a very early age. There are kids here who are 8 years old, and they just got it. And I'm thinking,
Mm.
Christ, I wish I'd had that wherewithal when I was that age. It's taken me a lot of work to get to where I am now. But that's okay because I've had X number of experiences and I'm just also learning. So we're all at different stages of learning. That's why it looks like it's chaotic. So you've got to
Mhm.
give humans a bit of leeway without excusing their actions because they should know better by now. But that's how basically life is all about. It's about us experiencing on multiple levels of reality in different alien planets at the same time, reporting back to the central Godhead so that it can adapt and and do things. It's so it's not a very judgmental universe. It's more of an experiential universe.
Yeah, that seems, I mean, that seems to me as well. I know you're no stranger to symbols
Oh,
and patterns. Obviously your work with the crop circles, and even before that, in just sort of called the Matrix world, you worked in advertising, I believe, where you were
working
working
with
on symbols to promote products or whatever it is. And then, of course, that transitioned into the crop circle phenomenon, which is loaded with multi layers of symbology. I want to ask you about, what do you think might be the most overlooked symbol in Portugal that may hold some deep meaning that people might not know about? Or what do you think is what do you think is a symbol out there that maybe people should take a closer look at?
Oh, it was the most obvious one that no one ever looked at before, and it was the original logo of the Templars in Portugal, which actually hardwires the Templar cross with the word Portugal, but there's a slight adaptation to it. Now, back in the day, when you're trying to survive and you're trying to get one over the church, you have to work with anagrams, symbols, and cryptography. And the answer is literally right in front of you, and you won't see it. And I was looking at the original deed that gives the Templars one third of the country called Portugal, which has just been, celebrating its unification after years of Arab domination. And they allowed the Arabs to stay, by the way. They gave them an option and said, look, if you behave and you respect the people whose land this belonged to, you can keep your money and you can keep your mosques and you can go and worship Allah. It's not a big deal. And I said, is that a trick question? No, we're real. Or we put you in jail or we'll kill you. What's the choice? And I said, we think we'll stay. So the Portuguese actually embedded the Arabic culture and honored it because it's a very Buddhist idea. I mean, if you got two arms wrapped around your enemy, they can't fight you. You see, you make friends with your enemy, and everybody got along just fine. So, on the first deed of the Templars received for a third of the country, there's this beautiful logo, and I've actually almost touched the original deed. It's in a place in Portugal, and you were within 1 millimeter of touching the animal skin. Wonderful moment in life. And I'm looking at the logo and it says, wait a minute, it's Portugal, but not the way I would write it. It says Portu, and there's an R in the middle. Wait a minute, it's an anagram. And if you know you're Portuguese, as I do, you break the words down, Portu o Graal. And I'm thinking, oh my God, through you achieved the grail. That's literally what it means. So, of course, Q, Bajent, Lee, and Lincoln.
Right.
So this is where I started asking them, do you mind if I take this a little bit further? I said, of course not. I mean, you can only take an idea so far. But I think you've helped me understand something very important, that the Grail is actually in Portugal, or the concept of the Grail, but what is the Grail? So that symbol alone is telling you that Portugal was set up far away from Rome, because that's as far as away you can get in Europe at the time from Rome, to establish a kingdom of conscience. That's why they asked the king of Portugal, who was a Templar master himself anyway, secret master. You have to read the actual calligraphy and the dedication to find out he was actually part of their group. And they basically wanted this kingdom of conscience in order to establish a utopia in Europe. And once that was established, they exported that to France, to Spain, England, and the rest is history, because everybody loved the Templars for what they were doing. They were creating a spiritual technology whereby everybody was in on the same thing together. They were growing together as a unit, self-protected, free from persecution. And I thought that is what I would call utopia in the 12th century. Absolutely. So that symbol, that logo that establishes the de facto independence of Portugal as the first nation state in Europe, which is another Templar first, is giving away the very secret that the Grail actually is in Portugal. But again, you've got to ask yourself, what is the Grail? Is it an object, or is it a state of consciousness? And it's all three, by the way.
And then, I don't want to highlight, Henry Lincoln and Michael Bagiette's work too much there, but,
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, it is an impressive piece of work. I want to stay on yours, but they also say, Grail was sangueal, right? Which means like holy blood, which goes back to this idea that there was a bloodline they were also protecting. So they were probably protecting, like you said, wisdom and possibly a sacred bloodline as well.
Yeah, and the whole thing goes together. I mean, if you go back to I was fascinated by this concept of a bloodline and how far back it goes. And when I was writing The Missing Land, which is years later, I wanted to concentrate on the gods of old, the people who gave us this incredible mysticism and the understanding of sacred space and how to build it. And I wondered, well, how far back can this possibly go? And the idea of the bloodline really rests with a group of people called the Anu, the people of Anu. We call the Anunnaki or the Anunaga, who are the people of the serpent. The Anu essentially is a sky god, an amorphous sky god like Ra, and seems to have originated around the Armenian highlands. And back then, this was a special group of people who worked as a parallel civilization to human beings before the Ice Age. And during the Ice Age, when the whole thing began to collapse. And the idea was that you're establishing a kind of mystical reverence within yourself in order to become better people, rather than being a bunch of cavemen dragging women by the hair into the cave and eating meat all day long. The gods were vegetarians, by the way. They're not meat eaters. So this is the divine bloodline of the Arya, the noble people, who becomes the Aryan tradition, which unfortunately the Nazis and the far right takes into a completely parallel universe that has no bearing to any reality. And they start using that concept as a white supremacist manifesto. That's not what it's about at all. The fact is that these people were light-skinned compared to local people, and they were blonde and red-haired, green eyes and blue eyes. But their point was that they had a mystical tradition, and the idea was that the priestly foundation was based on their model around the world, even in South America and in Polynesia. if you can understand that one.
Mhm.
Part of that concept was 7 groups of teachers presided by an 8. There's your octagon again. There was one woman involved in that, and she was the carrier of the bloodline. So it's mysticism, teaching, codes of conduct, and also the bloodline itself, and the mysteries of how to harness the laws of nature. And that eventually, 8,000 years later, ends up with the Templars.
It's amazing. I mean, the story is absolutely incredible. You do such a good job of laying the foundation in the book, showing people how like the property was acquired. You obviously did rigorous research over a period of time to lay that foundation,
I think I
and then
lost
you
my
start,
hair over it.
and then you
Literally, I mean,
take the
my
ball.
brain was not the same after that. I mean, it literally,
Oh, I'm sure you had a lot of fun going to libraries. I think you went to Harvard and all kinds of places
I
around the world to
begged.
get this information.
I was on my knees, literally physically on my knees at Harvard, begging them to get in. And I found that they had a copy of one of the original books written by the Cistercian monks. The other one was in Lisbon, and I didn't fancy a $3,000 flight
Hmm.
because I had to fly business class. I'm just too tall for economy. I plead with them. I said, I know the book is here. I didn't tell them that someone had hacked into their system to find out. And they looked me up and they said, "Well, you've published some very interesting material. I'll tell you what, don't tell anybody, but we'll give you a pass to come here for 6 times during a year. And what is it you're looking for?" I said, "I'm looking for this book." And I just remember sitting there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was the first person in the library and waiting for the book to come in, getting the
Mm,
gloves together. It
yeah.
was animal skin. And the 2 people brought it from a 3rd subterranean level at Harvard. You can hear the
Wow.
ding of the elevator. They bring out this enormous book. They carry it, they plonk it on the table. It makes a lovely loud sound. And they said, "Oh, you don't need gloves for this." And why not? Because the wax is going to maintain the pages supple. And you think, oh, and you're touching the corners of this book, 800 pages written on vellum, and all the corners are black from people, monks, doing this
Ah, yeah.
for what, 500 years? So
Wow.
reading about history, you are in history. That was an incredible moment. And yeah, I actually found I think it was on page 640 or something. They didn't have an index. It was
Mm.
a swearing in ceremony of the Templar master in Portugal. And it talks about protecting the bloodline of David. And I thought, oh God, why would you do that as a swearing in ceremony unless there was a bloodline to protect in Portugal? And that's where the penny dropped that they were protecting something of enormous value.
Wow. I mean, that must have been an amazing moment. I love the way you just
I
just
actually swore in
described that.
Harvard, and everybody turned around and everybody said, "He's found something original." I went, sorry.
That's amazing. Freddie, I just have one more question for you. This has been really fun. The First Templar Nation, if it has one message for humanity at this moment in time, what do you think it would be asking us to kind of remember about our history?
Oh, it's the one we keep forgetting about every 3rd generation, which is love each other as you'd love yourself. We're on this big boat called the planet Earth, going through space. You can't get off unless you die, and even then, it's a matter of perspective. You
Mhm.
might as well just get along, and also be good to yourself, do good deeds, do good words, and you can't wrong with that. That's what the Templars really were up to. That it was about the self-discipline of becoming a spiritual being while you're here in the physical world, surrounded by all this carnage that's going on. And in the 12th century, that was very important, and it's as important today. I don't think humanity has learned the lesson. We're getting better. It's very incremental because humanity's development is glacial. The pace is glacial. We work very slowly, but we are getting better at it. So the central message is no different to what it was 10,000 years ago, which is take care of your own spirit, be true to yourself, be kind with your words, and support each other whenever possible. And that's how we grow as a community towards better things. It sounds very cliched and very new age, but you know what? Looking at the world around me right now, we kind of need it right now.
Yeah, well said. Freddie, this has just been another awesome conversation. I can't recommend the book enough for anybody that's interested in these types of topics. It's a great place to go and get a great foundation. And then, the second half of the book, you take the football and you just run it down into the end zone and it divulges a lot of fascinating information. So, highly recommend it to everybody. Freddie, thank you so much for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
All right, cheers.